Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here, and today I'm going to be doing a video talking about a player that I think is very interesting, has had an interesting career, but is relatively forgotten compared to how good he was, and that is Eddie Jones. So if you're unfamiliar with Eddie Jones, he played from 1994 to 2008. He played with the Lakers, the Hornets, the Miami Heat, and the Grizzlies basically. And he was a very good player, I would say. He was a three-time All-Star in 97, 1998, and the year 2000. And I think why I want to make this video was when I was looking back at his career, I realized that he just had a career that was very unfortunate in that he was the guy that was traded away from a good team in a lot of scenarios, and then right after that, that team finally got over the hump and won. Really, there's two. What I'm thinking of is there's two specific scenarios, and I'll go through those in the video. But I guess another example of this would be like if you guys know anything about Adrian Dantley. He was this guy for the Bad Boy Pistons. He was really good. He was their leading scorer, and they had struggled in the playoffs to get over the hump and get to the finals and win. And then finally, when they traded him, they won the two back-to-back championships. So a guy who sort of had a similar career to that, and it's a little bit unfortunate, and I feel like because Eddie Jones always got traded away from a team right before they got great, like astounding, and then won titles, people don't know him as well as they should. Alright, so I'm going to go through his career a little bit, talk about some of his numbers, and get into it. And so first of all, just in case you don't know much about Eddie Jones, he is a guy who played like shooting guard and small forward. He's 6'6", 220, good shooter, good guy who would slash a lot and work off the dribble a lot. He averaged about 18 points a game in his prime. So he averaged that from between around 96 to around 2004. He was always averaging between like 16 to 20 points a game. And he would always get about around like 4 rebounds, 4 assists a game, along with a lot of steals. Like he did lead the league in steals one time, and he was always good for at least 2 a game. And so yeah, he was a good defensive presence as well. He was a 3-time all-defensive player, and things like that just get forgotten sometimes. So you gotta remind people. All right, so he played from the Lakers from 94 to from 94 to 1999, and he was kind of like the wave that came in after Magic left, and it was sort of like him and Nick Van Exel as the guys on the team for a while, and that was it. And that was kind of when the Lakers were struggling more. And then in '96 they get Shaq, and they got a lot more notoriety, and they also got Kobe, and so he had a really good season in '96 to '97. He was averaging around 16 points a game, and the Lakers were doing a lot better because they had Shaq, and he was just like basically the second option on the team, and he was impressive because with Shaq a lot more attention was drawn to him, and so Eddie Jones had he got better shots, he was open more often, got better opportunities to score, and people were really just able to see his game a lot better and see what he had to offer more. And so then in the next season, 97 to 98, the Lakers improved a lot, and Kobe kind of came out of his shell and averaged 16 points a game off the bench, and Eddie Jones averaged around 17 points a game and was an all-star again, and Nick Van Exel was an all-star, Kobe was an all-star, if I didn't already mention that, and then Shaq was an all-star. So they had 4 all-stars on their team. They got to the Western Conference Finals and lost, but it was a very impressive season. Del Harris was the coach at this point, and they were just really good and on the rise, and you were thinking to yourself, man, this team's really going to get somewhere, maybe when Kobe gets a little bit older. But they got Van Exel, they got Eddie Jones, they got Shaq, so when Kobe arrives, they're going to like be the title favorites. Then in 98 to 99, it was kind of weird. It was the lockout shortened season. They were the 4th seed. Then they beat Houston in the first round, the Charles Barkley, Scottie Pippen, Houston Rockets team. And then they also had Hakeem too, by the way. And then they got to the second round and played the Spurs, and the Spurs were the 1 seed. They were doing really well that year. They had David Robinson still in his prime, Tim Duncan, who was coming into his prime, and a lot of good role players around them as well, like Sean Elliott and a few other guys that were good. And they lost to them basically just because the Spurs had the Twin Towers, and that was overpowering compared to what the Lakers had, which is a lot of perimeter guys. And the Spurs were really good on defense, so the perimeter guys were less effective that year in that playoff series, and the Twin Towers were kind of overpowering because like just 2 beats 1, and they had 2 great big guys, and the Lakers had 1. So yeah. And so then in the next season, the Lakers got Phil Jackson as a head coach, and they also made a splash as far as player movement in that. Oh, by the way, Eddie Jones had a good season as well in that he had scored around 18 points a game. It wasn't an all-star game that year, but there was a good chance that he would have again been an all-star if there was a game. During the middle of the next season, about 20 or 30 games in, the Lakers wanted to make a splash, so they traded Eddie Jones to the Hornets for Glenn Rice because he was more of an established star who was well into his career at this point, and Eddie Jones was still seen as like a player more on the rise. And so Eddie Jones went to Charlotte and had a decent second half of his season because he had started slow in Los Angeles, and that's why they were wanting to trade him. He was only averaging around 13, 14 points a game. But then when he went to Charlotte, he bumped that up to around 19. So he finished averaging around 16 points a game, kind of like his typical numbers. And he was looking good. You know, he's still like a good defender at this point. I think this lockout shortened years when he led the league in steals, which was impressive. And he just was looking good all around still, you know, in his prime. The next year is when he had his best statistical season as far as scoring. He averaged 20 points a game. He still had around 2 steals a game, still around like 4 or 5 assists and rebounds a game. Charlotte was an okay team, but not great. But, you know, you had him there, and he was doing all right. Like, he was doing the best that he could with like an average team. And they didn't make really a splash in the playoffs whatsoever, but he was definitely the best player on the team. He was on the all-defensive team again, all-star again, and he was still hitting it and in his prime. Then the season following that, in the offseason, he got traded to the Miami Heat for from the Hornets for P.J. Brown and for Jamal Mashburn. And you had the Heat then, who were an okay team at this point. They had Alonzo Mourning still, and Tim Hardaway was kind of coming out of his prime at this point. He eventually left the team, but you had Alonzo Mourning and Eddie Jones basically as the core of the team. Then Alonzo went away because of injuries and disease he had, and then eventually you had Dwayne Wade come in, and then you had a core of like Eddie Jones and Dwayne Wade and Lamar Odom for a season, along with a young rookie Caron Butler. And then Butler and Odom got traded to the Lakers for Shaq, and all this while Eddie Jones isn't really getting on the defensive teams or all-star teams anymore, but he's still averaging around 18 points a game. And then when Shaq came in, 04-05, they had a core of like Dwayne Wade, Eddie Jones, Shaq, Udonis Haslem. So a pretty decent team at that point. A solid 3 scorers right there. And they won a lot of games, I think 60, and they got to the Eastern Conference Finals and lost to the Pistons. The Pistons were just a better team that year. And so then in the offseason, the Heat sort of thought that they needed to change something up and get more defense and just more well-rounded overall, because they had a lot of scoring prowess, but they just needed more help in other places. So then Eddie Jones got traded to the the Memphis Grizzlies for Jason Williams, White Chocolate, and then also for James Posey, who were then good role players for the Heat. And he kind of just was like an average to below average player in Memphis. He was like a starter. He was really average, I guess you'd say. He was putting up about 12 points a game. Like, he was decent, but not great. I guess the unfortunate thing is that when you look back at this guy's career, right when he leaves the Lakers, the next 3 seasons they won championships, and like 1 year with Glenn Rice as the third option, whereas Eddie Jones could have put up basically the same numbers and been the third option on that team, and then probably would have been kept on and stayed with the Lakers for the next 2 years, and could have been a 3-time champ after that. And then when he was on the Heat in 04-05, they were a 60-win team, and then he gets traded away for role players so the Heat can become more well-rounded. But then right after that, the Heat win the championship, and so I feel like you just got to feel for Eddie Jones. You know, he essentially got robbed of 4 titles when the trades were almost, I'd say, unnecessary, because for sure the Glenn Rice trade really didn't improve the team all that much. They basically just swapped like an 18-point scorer for an 18-point scorer, and like I'd almost argue Eddie Jones was the better defender. Glenn Rice was a bigger body, so he may have been better for matching up with small forwards, but Eddie Jones was still a good player at that point and didn't need to be traded. I think really what they're trying to do is clear the way for Kobe Bryant to come into his prime more, but I think that they could have done that and kept Eddie Jones, just playing him strictly as a small forward. But I think that they just really wanted to allow Kobe to flourish, so you can't really do anything about that when it happens, and the team is ultimately allowed to make whatever decision they want. I feel more bad on the Miami Heat one. It's just like, man, like, come on. He was having a good season. He was, the season before, he had gotten about 16 points a game, and then you trade him. Like, come on. He did experience Memphis, the Grizzlies. He was with them with their best season to that point. They had won 49 games. They were the 4 seed, but they did lose in the first round in 2005 and 2006, which was unfortunate. But he was like always there and always on really good contenders, and then just got traded away right before they got over the hump, especially, I guess, really mainly just with the Lakers and with the Heat. But a guy that I think is largely forgotten, but was really a big part of these championship contenders that we always think of, but we don't really remember everything that went down with forming those teams. And Eddie Jones was always the other guy that was getting traded to bring in the piece that the team needed, which is unfortunate for him, but fortunate for the franchise trading him away. So that's a little bit about Eddie Jones if you weren't familiar with him. Really prolific scorer in his prime, good defender, really great at stealing the ball. Just kind of always on the wrong team at the wrong time, in that he just was not what his teams needed, even though he was a really good NBA talent. His best asset was his scoring, and the teams he was on always had sufficient scoring and didn't really need him, so they were always trading him. Alright guys, that's all I got for today. I hope you enjoyed the video, learned a little bit, and I'll see you next time. Bye.